Welcome to the Fantasy's Finest Fantasy Football Podcast. Here are your hosts, William Spencer, Jalen McQueen, and Mark Carter.
What's going on? Welcome back to the Fantasy's Finest Podcast. I'm your host, William Spencer, and we are going to get you ready for Week 5. We got waivers on deck. We got some more injury news that you need to be updated on so that you can make sure that you got the best lineups to get the opportunity to win your league's championship. So, like I said, waivers on deck, injury news on deck, more information for you guys to get you guys set. So make sure that you're locked in with the podcast on our YouTube channel at Fantasy's Finest or on Apple and Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts on audio formats too. We're there. And you can follow us at Fantasy's Finest across your favorite social media platforms like TikTok, Twitter, Facebook. We're all over there too, Instagram, and even on Threads. We're there too. So lock in with us. We're going to get you right for this fantasy season and the rest of the way. Now, we got a lot to cover, so let's jump right into our news and notes and get you guys set for the latest information coming out of the NFL.
News and notes from around the NFL.
All right, first up, Christian Watson, Green Bay Packers wide receiver. Stop me if you've heard this before. He's hurt. Suffered an ankle injury, high ankle injury. He's expected to miss multiple weeks behind that injury he suffered versus the Minnesota Vikings. Not a good look. And it's unfortunate, man, because I feel like he's got so much talent, but he's constantly getting injured. It just this time it's not really his fault. It's not like a hamstring injury that he's had to deal with over the last couple of seasons. It's just a bad role. And unfortunately, he's not going to be around. He's going, like I said, he's going to be expected to miss multiple weeks behind his ankle injury. Jonathan Taylor, running back for the Indianapolis Colts, also suffered a high ankle sprain versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, not the Minnesota Vikings, the Indianapolis Colts are trying to downplay the injury. They're calling it a mild high ankle sprain. They haven't ruled him out for Week 5 yet. And another note is that the topic of putting Jonathan Taylor on the short-term IR, if he were to be placed on there, he would miss the next 4 games of the regular season, is being thrown around, but the Colts aren't ready to use that option just yet. So, to me, that seems like a red flag. The fact that they even brought up putting him on short-term IR, not a good sign. Hopefully, we'll get more information as we go on through the week. Maybe we'll even get to see if he can practice going up to Week 5. Good news on the way. Browns not only activated Nick Chubb off the PUP list, but he's been cleared to practice this week. Good news, if you've been able to stash or find Nick Chubb off the waiver wire, maybe your league forgot to pick him up during the draft, but if you have him on your bench or you have him in your IR spot, he's now coming back to practice. I'm not saying that he's going to play this week, but the fact that he's been able to come back not so soon, he's coming back off the PUP. He missed the first couple of games, but having him back practicing hopefully bodes well for him coming back and starting in the near future. Conversely, Jonathan Brooks, rookie running back for the Carolina Panthers, his 21-day window has not been activated yet, according to head coach Dave Canales. Now, I get why, because Chubb Hubbard and Miles Sanders have been performing very well so far that they don't feel like they need to rush Jonathan Brooks back. But I'm not going to lie. I have him stashed. I need Jonathan Brooks back, like, pronto. But right now, they're not going to activate his window. It's probably going to be a little bit longer. So we just got to be patient, wait for him to come back. Because right now, the offense is looking much better with Andy Dalton as opposed to Bryce Young. Going down to the Texans, Joe Mixon and Tank Dell are reportedly day-to-day in their respective injuries, and both seem to be on the path to be able to return for Week 5 against the Buffalo Bills. Joe Mixon was dealing with an ankle injury. He was able to practice last week, but he wasn't able to make it to the game for Week 4. They opted to just let him take it easy and be prepared for this week. So that's good news. Tank Dell on the same path. Considered day-to-day. Both of them are slated or expected to be able to return in week 5 against the Buffalo Bills. And that is good news for my lineup because I got Joe Mixon on the bench and I've been waiting to use him. And finally, Anthony Richardson left week 4's game against the Pittsburgh Steelers with a hip pointer. He was ruled out in the game. Shane Steichen says that it's not a huge injury, but we don't know what his status is leading up to week 5. And should he miss week 5 or longer, Joe Flacco will come in to start for the Indianapolis Colts and hold down the fort until he's able to return. So that'll wrap it up for our news. Now let's get into the best part. Waiver wire targets for week 5. Let's get you guys set. All right, now I got a nice little list for you guys that you should be aiming to get these names off of the waiver wire and add them to your fantasy teams. For one reason or another, these guys are looking to be tagged off the wire, and you need to know who these guys are. So let's get right into it. And from the outset, I already told you about Jonathan Taylor and what's going on with him. Running back Trey Sermon, rostered in less than 1% of ESPN leagues. He's probably going to be one of the main targets coming off the waiver wire for this week 5, simply because if Jonathan Taylor can't play, Trey Sermon is going to be that guy to get the lion's share of the work in that backfield. So he's definitely going to be a priority for fantasy managers to target heading into week 5. Dontavian Wicks, wide receiver from the Green Bay Packers, rostered in just 10% of ESPN leagues. That means he's out there. Check your waiver wires for him and make sure you put in a claim for him. 13 targets against the Minnesota Vikings. Finished the wide receiver 3, just 5 catches, but he totaled 24.8 fantasy points, 2 touchdowns, 78 receiving yards. That's a significant target share for a guy who was behind Christian Watson on the depth chart and then starting in the wide receiver starting role. But with Christian Watson out of the way, sorry to make it sound like that, but since he's hurt, Dontavian Wicks will move up to those 3 wide receiver snaps that he'll be getting moving forward. And he's got big playability. And Jordan Love likes to use him around the red zone as one of his touchdown targets. So you definitely want to put in a claim for Dontavian Wicks. If you're looking for a running back, I got another guy who you might want to target. Now, his roster percentage is a little bit higher than the other guys that I've mentioned. That's Chase Brown from the Cincinnati Bengals, their running back. He's rostered in 55% of ESPN leagues, just a tad higher than the threshold of the other guys that I mentioned already. But he had a great week 4, 23.2 fantasy points against the Carolina Panthers, 15 for 80 yards on the ground, 5.3 yards per attempt. Superb for a guy who only had 27 snaps in week 4, ceding more work to Zach Moss, who's the lead back for the Bengals. But hopefully this will push Brown to be able to get more work. It was great to see him out there. And because of the bye weeks that are already starting, plus injuries to the running back position, we're looking for anybody that we can get our hands on. So Chase Brown, definitely an option that you want to put a claim in for, especially if you need a running back. Now, here's one that I didn't see coming. Alexander Madison, running back for the Las Vegas Raiders, rostered in 30%. Antonio Pierce is already back. Alexander Madison stating that he will get more work moving forward. He's been able to produce and kind of outproduce Zamir White, who we thought that he was going to be the lead guy for the Las Vegas Raiders in their backfield, especially after the finish that he had, his 4-game stretch in 2023, down to towards the end of the season. He was fantastic. So to see Alexander Madison come in and start to move in on his turf is just mind-boggling to say the least. But to be fair, Madison's been putting in the work. 12 yards per attempt in week 4 against the Cleveland Browns. Just 5 carries for 60 yards. He had 21 snaps in that game, 35 for Zamir White, who had 17 carries for 50 yards, 2.9 yards per attempt. See what I'm going? Alexander Madison is doing more with less. Looks like the Antonio Pierce is going to try and get him more. How I feel about it, if you're in a situation where you need a running back, you may have David Montgomery, who's on a bye. J.K. Dobbins is on a bye. Chargers are on a bye. So if you're missing a guy, you need a spot start for this week, probably roll the dice on Alexander Madison and in the hopes that he continues his growth and production and continues to steal more work out of Zamir White. Now, here's a guy that I tried to put people on earlier back in week 2. Now, if you don't believe me, you can go to the website, fantasyfinest.com, because we have our week 2 waiver wire article already up there, and this guy's name was on it back then. Bucky Irvin, running back from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 52% rostered. His name has been ringing bells lately, and he's expected to continue to get more work out of the Tampa Bay backfield, but 4.9 yards per attempt against the vaunted Philadelphia Eagles defense. He also got the goal line work over Rashad White, punching one in for a touchdown. He finished at a top 25 running back for week 4. He's continuing, like I said, to get more work, being more involved in the Bucs offense. And while he's the Robin to Rashad White's Batman, he's still getting it done. Like I said before, if you need a running back for this week because your starters are on a bye from the teams that are on a bye right now, definitely make the investment of getting Bucky Irvin. Another guy I was trying to tell people about, and the only reason I'm really excited about this is because if you go to our TikTok page, Fantasy's Finest TikTok page, I had a video up of Kareem Hunt at practice, and he was going through the motions. They was going through practice. It didn't look like he was doing anything strenuous. But in my comment section, people were telling me, oh, man, Will, you don't know what you're talking about. Carson Steele is going to be the guy you should be picking up off the waiver wire. Not Kareem Hunt, not Samaje Perine. You got to go get Carson Steele. And what happened in week 4 against the Chargers? Let me read it for you. 4.9 yards per attempt in his first game back as a Chief against the Chargers. He had a substantially better game than Carson Steele, who only got 2 carries to Kareem Hunt's 14. Now, I've been trying to tell people Kareem Hunt was brought in for a reason. Isaiah Pacheco could possibly miss the remainder of the season. There's been rumors that he may not be able to return because of an injury. We don't know any details, but right now he's on the injury reserve. He's going to miss the next 4 weeks. We'll get more updates as we get closer to the end of his stint on the IR. But right now, until further notice, Kareem Hunt is the back to own for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I even got comments like, well, what if Clyde Edwards-Helaire comes back? What about him? He's done. They were getting ready to cut him before. He's not going to impact Kareem Hunt moving forward. If anything, Samaje Perine will still be hanging around because he's their passing down guy. But Kareem Hunt can also catch out of the backfield too. He just needs the opportunities like any other running back. But if he gets them, Samaje Perine is going to have to take a back seat to Kareem Hunt. That's what I've been hoping for. And to wrap up the episode, one more wide receiver. Josh Downs, wide receiver from the Indianapolis Colts, rostered at just 9% of ESPN leagues. Oh, I'm sorry. Kareem Hunt, rostered in 22. So he's still out there. Go get him. But Josh Downs, rostered in 9% of ESPN leagues. He had a big game in week 4 to help Joe Flacco out and get that W against the Pittsburgh Steelers. 9 targets, 8 receptions, 82 yards, and a touchdown, 22 fantasy points on the day. He also finished inside the top 10 among wide receivers for fantasy in week 4, finishing as the wide receiver 8, a positive to having Joe Flacco back in the game. You saw what he did last year with the Cleveland Browns and Amari Cooper. So hopefully, and I'm not trying to downplay Anthony Richardson. I do think he's a good quarterback, but we need to see a little bit more progression in his passing ability, more consistency in his passing ability. Flacco kind of gives you that because he's a savvy vet. He's been able to come in as a backup, be able to deliver the ball to his key skill players and help them thrive for fantasy. So Michael Pittman is probably going to be a lock this week to start, but Josh Downs, extra wide receiver that you might need, going to be heavily targeted by Joe Flacco in that offense. So that'll wrap it up for this episode, guys. Thank you for checking out the podcast. As always, lock in with us on our YouTube channel. We're doing video again this year. Not again this year, but we're doing video for the first time. So you can check out our video podcasting on our YouTube channel. And like I said before, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all those other podcast platforms for audio. Subscribe to us and stay up with us. So we're going to get you right for the rest of the fantasy season. But that's it. I'll check you guys on the next episode. Y'all take it easy.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy's Finest podcast. Be sure to join the community on Facebook and follow us on Twitter too at the Fantasy's Finest. See you next episode.